Welcome back everyone. So in this video, I'm going to discuss about UVM file logging in details with an example. And uh, the previous video is very important for this, in which we discussed the way to replace the simulation action on the basis of severity and ID. So we will replace the simulation action on the basis of severity and ID of certain components, and we will replace it with one of the UVM simulation action that we discussed in my previous lectures, and that is UVM lock. So by replacing that particular action with UVM lock, uh, so the targeted macro for which you replaced the simulation action will be able to print its messages on a single text file, and it can output it into your work directory. So in case if you want to log your reports, your summary into a separate text file instead of printing it on a transcript, you could do that by replacing the simulation action with UVM lock. And before that, you need to declare a file descriptor, and you need to use the system verilog construct called $fopen, which we will use to open and write a file. So let's begin. So first, I will create a file descriptor. You could create the file descriptor of type int or integer. You should prefer integer if you are dealing with Verilog files, but I will use int here. And let's call it file. After that, in any phase, I will use the build phase, and inside the build phase, I will use the $fopen system verilog construct. So to use that, you need to write file equals to $fopen, and inside it you have to write two arguments. The first argument should be passed as a string, and this argument is going to be the name of the file. So let's say we want to call that particular file as file.txt. And the second argument is going to be the operation you want to perform. And that operation should also be written as a string. And there are two operations. One is read operation, which which can be done using the denotation R, and the second one is write operation, which can be done by simply writing W. So in our case, since we want to collect the report and we want to write it into a file called file.txt, we will use W, which is used to write a file. And right after that, so the first step is declaring the file descriptor, then using the $fopen to write a file, and right after that you need to target the particular hierarchy row which you want to replace the simulation action to UVM log. So let's just begin. So the very first step is to set a default or any file. So there is a method of setting log file, and like our verbosity replacement or simulation replacement methods, they have the level of specific, that how specific it could be, whether you are targeting a severity, ID, or a certain hierarchy. And it also have the hierarchy and non-hierarchy variants, as we have discussed in my previous lecture, that you could use the hierarchy variant by simply writing _hier, and then you can access uh, all the components or the objects which lies below that particular component or object, and it is test in our case. So first we will use the default hierarchy method, and to do that you just have to write set report default file hierarchy, and inside this particular uh, setup method you only need one argument, and that is the file descriptor. So just now we set file as a file descriptor, and we also assigned the $fopen method to write it into a file which will be called file.txt. So basically a file by the name of file.txt will be created, and txt is the extension. So let's set the default hierarchy as the file, and besides this we also need to replace uh, the simulation action of any component or any reporting macro present inside a certain component with the with the UVM log. So let's say we want to target each and every reporting macros, and we want to print it inside the file called file.txt. So as you can remember that we have three categories, so I will be using the hierarchy category, which is set, report, severity, action. So on the basis of the severity, I could write the info, the messages, the reporting macros on the file, on this particular file, which is pointed by this file descriptor. So let's use this method. And we are going to use the hierarchy method. So here in this particular method, we have two arguments. The first argument is going to be the severity. So let's say we want to target all the UVM infos. And the second method is going to be the action. So the default action assigned to UVM info is UVM display. So for our video, we should replace the simulation action to UVM log. So what this means that this method will set the descriptor file as the default reporting uh, log file setup. So, and the other method, which is just the simulation action override, will replace all the uh, reporting macros that have severity of UVM info with UVM log. So the simulation action of UVM display will be replaced with UVM log. So this will cause every UVM info present in our UVM test bench to be printed inside that particular file instead. And the name of that file is going to be file, which I have mentioned right here with the .txt extension. So let's see whether this works or not. Let's compile the code. Let's start the simulation. And let's run the simulation. Okay, what we have here. As you can see that we are not seeing uh, any of the UVM info reporting macro in our transcript because we replaced the simulation action for all the UVM info present inside the test bench from UVM display with UVM log. So there should be a file. So let's see whether it is created or not. So this is my working directory, and yeah, there is a file called file.txt, and here you can see that all of the UVM info reporting macros are saved and printed right here. So this is a very important uh, mechanism in which you could instead write a separate file as per your desired format. And inside that file, all the reporting macros of the targeted severity or ID could be written. And it might be easy for you to debug by having a separate txt file record as opposed to seeing everything inside the transcript. I mean, the transcript also has the same principle, but still, this is what you can do using the UVM logging mechanism. So let's try other stuff with this. Let's say we want to set the logging file for a certain hierarchy and for a certain ID. So that basically means that I want it to be more specific. And for that, let's create another descriptor, and let's call that descriptor save ID, since the log file will be set on the basis of the severity and the ID. So I'm calling it save ID. You could call it whatever you want. And let's write another f open. So this time it is for save ID. And the file should also be called save underscore ID. And I will still choose the .txt extension and the write operation. So let's say we want to set that file or that file descriptor as a default file for a certain hierarchy and uh, for a certain severity and certain ID. So we could do that. So here you could see that this particular uh, action override method will be replacing all the reporting macros with severity of UVM info with the simulation action of UVM log. So let's target uh, more specific stuff. So the function is same, set report severity. So of course, uh, it will target the particular severity and ID, and there are going to be three arguments. The first argument is going to be severity. So let's say we are targeting all the UVM infos, and the second argument is going to be ID. So let's say we want to target all the UVM infos inside the monitor class. So there is a UVM info inside the monitor class, and the ID is retrieved by using the get type name method, which returns the name of the class itself. So the ID is going to be monitor, and the third argument is going to be the file descriptor. And for this particular case, we will use our second mention file descriptor save underscore ID. So how will this particular set report uh, file method, that log file setup method, how will it affect it? How will it affect this one? So the same rules follow. Uh, the more specific it gets, the higher level of precedence it will have. So it will have all the UVM infos, and there are going to be 10 occurrences of UVM info since we have 10 sequences. So it will take all the UVM info present inside the monitor component, and it will print it into a file called save underscore id.txt as mentioned here. So what will happen then to the file called file.txt? So all the reporting, all the UVM infos with the ID of monitor will not be printed inside this particular file. Instead, it will be printed inside the save ID file. So just to confirm, I will open the file.txt, and here you can see that all the IDs are getting printed, and you could see the occurrences of the monitor. Here you can see that this particular reporting macro is of monitor ID, so is this, and so is this. So after setting up this particular specific log file setup, this particular file will be replaced and it will no longer have all the UVM info reporting macros with the ID of monitor. And instead of this, a file called save.id underscore ta.txt will have all of those reporting macros with the ID of monitor. So let's try this out. So let's compile the code, the top level specifically. Okay, let's start the simulation. Okay, so as expected, we don't have any of the reporting macros on our transcript. So you can see that in our summary also, but in our summary, we did see the number of occurrences of UVM info, but since the simulation action associated to those UVM infos are replaced with UVM log, so we will not see any of those UVM info on our transcript. Instead, we will have two files created in our work directory. As you can see, the very first file is file.txt, and the next file is save underscore id.txt. So just to recall, we said all the uh, all the UVM info present inside the monitor component uh, to be to be printed uh, on the file which is being pointed out by the save underscore id descriptor. So that file is save underscore id.txt, which is created. So I will open it, and you can see that all of this UVM macro belongs to the monitor component. And you could check out the ID. All of these have the ID of monitor, and these have multiple occurrences as per the sequences. 10 occurrences, since we have 10 repetitions of sequences. So what about the UVM info macros of monitor ID inside the file.txt? So inside the file.txt, as I have mentioned previously, you will not have the UVM info macros with monitor ID, as you can see, because that particular file setup method took precedence over the default file hierarchy. So it does not have any of the reporting macros with monitor ID. It does have all the reporting macros with sequence ID, driver ID, scoreboard, etc., but not of the monitor ID. So besides this, we do have several of the other methods. So we have some of the less specific ones. So the idea is pretty simple. So as I have discussed with my previous videos for the verbosity replacement and the severity and action override methods, the more the specific the particular method is, the higher level of precedence it will get over the other. So let's try the other variant. Before that, let's say I want to write few more descriptors. So we already have two descriptors. The file one is default, which will have the lowest precedence. The second one is the most specific one, which has both the severity and the ID. And the third one is going to be, let's say it is going to be ID. And the fourth one is going to be severity. So we will load their respective files. Okay, so we will write few more log file setup methods. So let's say the first one is targeting ID, and at the end we have to write file, and then since we want it to get applied to the entire hierarchy, we will use hierarchy. And just to make sure that we are targeting, like, because we want to compare that if both of them are targeting the same level of hierarchy or not. So just to make it sure, I will still target all the UVM info reporting macros with the ID of monitor. Let's just close this. Okay, I think I did close the test file also. So So the first argument is going to be ID and the second argument is going to be the file descriptor. And in this case, I will use the file descriptor of ID, which will create a file of id.txt. And the other method is based on severity. So as you can see it that the first argument is going to be the severity, and we are targeting all the UVM infos. And the second method is going to be the file descriptor. And in this case, we will be using our final file descriptor, which is SEV. So if we have a file, which has all the, uh, let's say if we have a file, it goes by the name of SevID, and if it has all the uh, UVM infos with the ID of monitor, then this one has higher priority compared to the other two. If we have a file uh, by the name of id.txt and it has all the UVM info reporting macro messages of ID monitor, then this one has higher priority. And so same goes for this. So if you have a file of sev.txt and it has all the reporting macros of ID monitor, then this one has a higher priority than the other two. So let's find out which of which out of these three will work. So we will compile the code again. So let's check out our working directory. So we do have 4 files. The first one is the obvious one, the file.txt, which has nothing inside it this time. And the second one, let's see, we want to check the sev_id.txt. So here you can see that it still has all the files of ID monitor. Then what about the sev.txt and the id.txt? Okay, what is happening here? Okay, so eventually the sev.txt got get all the file, all the reporting macros besides uh, besides the one which have a ID of monitor. So that is what happened. So the sev_id.txt still gets all the uh, reporting macros with monitor, and it is because of the fact that this particular method is not targeting a specific hierarchy. Instead, it is targeting all the UVM info reporting macros from the test to the bottom. So it is because we did not mention any specific hierarchy, like we did not mention anything like this. So it is targeting everything down the UVM test component. So that's why, since it has higher priority compared to this, it just replaced this. So for that reason, because it is more specific, it also has severity as an argument. It will have all the UVM info reporting messages inside its pointed file, and this will have nothing. So compared to both of this two we are contending, we're contesting for all the reporting macros with the ID of monitor. Since this one is more specific, it also includes severity as an argument, as the first argument. This one took precedence over this one. So if I just comment this out and just close it. Okay, I did close my VS Code again. So as you can see that I commented the most specific one out, and right now I am totally sure that this one will create uh, a file called id.txt, and it will have all the UVM reporting macros which are inside the monitor component. So let's find out. I will just compile my code. So here we have file.txt, which should be empty, and then we do not have a new save underscore id.txt file. So it should be empty since we did not set any file log, any log file for that particular descriptor. And now we have save.txt, which should have all the UVM reporting macros besides the one with the ID of monitor. And finally, we have id.txt, and it should have all the UVM reporting macros of monitor component. So let's take it to the next level. What if we are referencing to the same hierarchy uh, using both the ID file hierarchy and the severity file hierarchy? So let's see if we want to uh, access the environment class, then agent, then monitor, and inside it we are setting this. For this, let's use the normal variant because we don't have any hierarchy down the monitor. So right now, even though this one is for severity, it is targeting the same, the very same component uh, that this particular log file setup is targeting. So both are targeting all the UVM info reporting macros by the monitor component. So let's find out what will happen. Let's start the simulation. Okay, let's check our working. Let's check our work directory. And here, let's open each four of them together. So as you can see that the save underscore id is empty as it is supposed to be. The file.txt this time is filled with all the UVM info macros beside the UVM info macros of the monitor subcomponent, the monitor component. So here you could see that the saf.txt is empty and the id.txt has all the UVM info macros of monitor component. So which basically means that this one is having higher precedence over the severity one. So the ID one has higher precedence over the severity one. So this one will take precedence over severity one, and this one will take precedence on both of them. And this one has the lowest priority. So that's all for UVM logging. I hope you find this video useful and stay tuned for more. Thank you so much.